Good afternoon, everybody. Appreciate you joining NetX in their series around security. Today's security workshop, I am joined by Antwune Gray, a VP of Technical Operations, and Christian Mumma, who's our Director of Infrastructure Solutions. And my name is Kevin Conlan. I'm Senior Vice President of Sales. I run sales for NetX. I wanted to take just a few minutes to give you a little background on NetX as a company, who we are, a little bit about our background. I think that would be helpful. NetX has been around for 25 years. We established 1997. We're headquartered in New Jersey. We've got a strong background in security and data protection. As a matter of fact, the roots of our company, the leadership grew out of Symantec and Veritas, and we have a very strong background, as I said, in security and data protection, specifically around the Veritas platform. For those of you that are not familiar with Veritas, it's the leader in data protection. They're in 87% of the Fortune 500. They have about 80,000 customers worldwide. NetX is one of their elite partners. We're designated as a platinum partner, which is a designation assigned to partners that actually have to have a lot of certifications and meet certain guidelines that Veritas has laid out. And I tell you that from a standpoint of we have a lot of experience in a variety of different disciplines and different types of verticals, financial services, pharma, education, government. And there's a list of others that we could share with you at the appropriate time. But I wanted to put that out there. We have a lot of experience, and I think it's important to kind of bring that up. A lot of our experience comes out of the fact that we've been put into a lot of different environments, and the natural inclination of having those multiple environments. We've learned through the most recent time there have been an increased number of security threats that have been attacking the customer base that we work with and the general population. And the key word that's in the media right now is ransomware, which is a very prevalent security threat to every organization. And part of our discussion today in the workshop, we want to give you an education on security as a whole, and we'll talk about all of the different components of security, of which ransomware will have a discussion of as well. Just to give you a little bit of color on the topic of ransomware and security, the U.S. suffered 65,000 attacks last year. That's about 7 per hour. The average ransom demand was about 170,000 per incident, and 60% of the breaches that occurred were a result of an unpatched vulnerability inside of an organization. Combination of unpatched vulnerabilities and then also business emails that have been compromised. 77% of the business email target employees outside of finance and executive roles. The biggest role inside of an organization is sales. I don't know if that says very much about my group of professionals, but we open up a lot of malware and phishing emails that we probably shouldn't, and that's how the threat of security slash ransomware gets into an organization. And then it's followed by finance and then the director level. Spear phishing has become a very big problem. The average organization, there's about 700 targeted spear phishing incidents per organization a year. So just give you a high level in terms of that's the actual number of events that are happening, and it's a real problem. And that's the reason for the workshop today. We wanted to give you a base level understanding as to who we are, what security threats are, and then kind of give you some of our experiences in terms of case studies and the like. Just a little bit more about NetX in terms of I talked about being a platinum partner. Our core competencies as an organization are cloud computing, Enterprise Vault, InfoScale, Net Backup, which is a Veritas product, and then obviously security. I would like to now kind of turn the conversation over to Antwune Gray. Antwune will kind of walk you through a couple of the high-level profiles of security, what they are, and then give you some case studies as well. So, Antwune.
Thank you, Kevin. So we'll start with what is ransomware. During this particular workshop, we'll make no assumptions, so we'll just start with the basics. Ransomware is a form of malware designed to encrypt files on a device, rendering any files and the systems that rely on them unusable. Think your virtual infrastructure. This is a definition put forth by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. So basically, the malicious or bad actors will demand some ransom in exchange for a decryption key. However, there's no guarantee that the data can be decrypted after paying, or that the bad actor will actually provide that decryption key. Ransomware as a service also makes the novice bad actor as dangerous as the pros, because now you can have your a very new bad actor out there taking advantage of some very sophisticated technology to attack your environment. And with that, these novice bad actors may not see the value in actually providing the decryption key once the ransom has actually been paid. Also, paying could inadvertently encourage this criminal business model. There are huge investments now in the bad actor community where they are actually financially backing one another in order to push their capabilities forward. And it is also important to note that the goal of ransomware is not always just about getting the money. The ransomware attack could potentially serve as a distraction from other malicious purposes. These distractions could be hiding a traditional attack against the network, covering traces of an earlier attack, or providing cover while data is stolen or exfiltrated from the network. It's akin to the bad guy in the movie tossing a grenade over his shoulder, after he's wreaked havoc on an organization. So, fun fact, or not so much fun for those infected, in 1989, the first ransomware was actually created by a Harvard-educated biologist, Dr. Joseph Popp. He basically disguised his ransomware as a survey. He distributed this ransomware on 5 1/4-inch floppies to AIDS researchers. And by the way, I looked up 5 1/4 floppies just out of curiosity. You can get a pack of 10 on eBay for $9.99. On the 90th boot of the system, a ransom message requested money to be sent to a PO box in Panama. Things are much more sophisticated now with Bitcoin, as well as you'll notice that their ransoms are much higher. Back in that day, the bottom of the ransom was $189, and the top was $378, which you can possibly see here in the screenshot. Dr. Popp was actually arrested. He was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial in 1991. Another fun fact, Dr. Popp wore a condom on his nose, curlers in his beard, and a cardboard box on his head to ward off threats of radiation. Did he do that to get out of standing trial? Who knows? So next we'll talk about some common infection vectors, right? How is the unwanted software getting into the environment to begin with? So ransomware is primarily delivered through malicious attachments, links in send an email. It could be a PDF, as Kevin mentioned in the intro, sales guys or sales staff, opening, what they're thinking is a PO. Could be an infected PDF, those types of things. Network intrusion through poorly secured ports and services, such as the big one, remote desktop protocol, and we have a solution to mitigate that particular issue. It could be dropped by other malware infections. You think TrickBot and wormable or other forms of ransomware that exploit network vulnerabilities. Think the WannaCry ransomware variant. And again, just to reiterate, paying a ransom does not guarantee an organization will regain access to their data. In fact, some individuals or organizations were never provided with decryption keys after they've paid the ransom. So you want to exhaust all possibilities before you pay your ransom. And point to note also, and it's beyond this particular slide, you may want to check with your cybersecurity insurance firm to see what the protocols are once you are attacked by ransomware. Are you supposed to pay, things of that nature? So make sure you're well informed. So just kind of a quick overview of just how ransomware works. And again, we're making no assumptions, so we're sort of stepping back to the basics here. So the victim visits an infected or malicious website, clicks a link, or malvertising. There's all sorts of terms for this this software. Crimeware is another. A malicious payload is then loaded onto the victim's system and moves laterally through the network. And in most cases these days, the victim is actually infected from an email exploit or a worm, basically phishing. So once this happens, the attacker then disables security tools, sometimes executes through scheduled tasks. It gains elevated privileges or permissions. And once they've gained those elevated privileges or permissions, then they're free to move throughout the network. We're going to see a case study where CTO's credentials were actually collected, and that gave the bad actors free reign to the environment. They were able to stop it, though. So once the next step is for the actual malicious code to actually contact the attacker's command and control server and download a public key. Okay. During this particular process also, it's important to understand that exfiltration may also be happening. So it's important to know what your baseline of network usage is, because in most cases, when you look at some of the attacks from the past, there were troves of data actually exfiltrated from the environment. If you have some sort of alert to notify you when you're exceeding your baseline data usage, you could possibly kind of cut this off a bit. So anyway, back to the slide. Data is then encrypted, and a ransom note provides ransom detail payments. And generally, these fees will be in Bitcoin. Those instructions would include, the installing of a Tor browser, basically the Onion network, because basically the Tor browser allows the bad actor to sort of work anonymously. The Tor browser is a free and open source software for enabling anonymous communication. It directs internet traffic through a free worldwide volunteer overlay network consisting of more than 7,000 relays for concealing a user's location and usage from anyone conducting network surveillance or traffic analysis. So you can see why the Tor browser is the vehicle of choice for getting that malware, that Bitcoin payment out to the bad actor. Once the payment has been made and the bad actor is satisfied and they are not then demanding more ransom, because that has also happened, then the bad actor provides the private key to decrypt the data. That is the best case scenario after paying. Again, however, as reported by CISA and as well as the FBI, paying the ransom does not necessarily mean that your data will be decrypted. So let's talk about some notable ransomware attacks. Acelion attacked in February of 2021. This seems like ancient history at this particular point, because these things happen so frequently. And these are just some of the big names. Acer attacked in March of 2021. This is old news. Again, ancient history. Colonial Pipeline, the big one. attacked in April of 2021. Disrupted fuel supply up and down the East Coast. JBS Foods attacked in May of 2021. This is also old news. Kaseya attacked in July of 2021. Basically, the supply chain ransomware leveraged a vulnerability in the Kaseya software. And what these bad actors did is they actually attacked the managed service providers, inserting the product or their bad code into the Kaseya platform, and then infected between 800 and 1,500 businesses down the chain. This is old news. Accenture attacked in July of 2021. Gigabyte, August of 2021. There will be more. T-Mobile, for instance. And I'm sure there's some attacks going on right now that won't necessarily make the news. Now, let's talk about a couple of ransomware attacks where NetX actually had involvement in remediating or getting the customer back online. So a large utility agency in Washington, D.C., was attacked in May of 2021. The ransomware attack encrypted the VMware guests. NetX had just recently implemented Veritas Net Backup. The customer was fully recovered and running the same day. No ransom was paid. The bad actor and attack vector was not disclosed to NetX. Another county government here attacked in April of 2021. Ransomware attack encrypted VMware guests again. Windows Net Backup master server was compromised. The Net Backup DR files were stored on a NAS device that was also encrypted. So I'll pause here and just mention architecting the environment is just as important as having the solutions in place, because a bad architecture could basically toss good money behind bad. NetX rebuilt the master server and imported the backup images from a deduplication device. The bad actor and attack vector was not disclosed to NetX. So, question: how prepared are you to respond to a breach? And with all of that, you may ask yourself, okay, well, how can I protect my network? I think I've put the device in place that will solve my problems, but we're here to tell you that there's no silver bullet. The NIST or the National Institute of Standards and Technology actually provides some guidance to help organizations protect against ransomware attacks and recover from them if they happen. These advisories basically consist of, some of the usual things that we've seen, right? Such as using antivirus software, keeping all of your computers fully patched. The second bullet would seem to be almost a common sense, right? It's almost one of those things that you would ensure is taking place in your environment. But if you look back over history, such as the Equifax breach in 2017, where there were 143 million records compromised, that was due to an unpatched Apache server. You can look at JP Morgan Chase attacked in 2014, 83 million records compromised. Again, weak security. The U.S. voter registry in 2017, 198 million voters records were compromised due to an unpatched server. So I'll continue. You would also want to block access to known ransomware sites, right? There's some technologies out there that we'll discuss, one in particular that allows you to implement geolocations, right? So that you can ensure that you are not allowing traffic from known bad areas or IPs. Whitelist applications, back up your data and store offline. We're going to have a whole section on the on the backup components, as well as train your users. You want to ensure that your users are a part of your security posture. Okay, there's more users in the environment than there are security professionals. So the more eyes that you have looking out for the malicious acts or phishing emails, etc., the better prepared your organization will be. So question, how comfortable are you that your business keeps up to date on security vulnerabilities in systems and software that you use and applies patches to fix those problems as quickly as you need to? The second part to that question is, are you monitoring your environment for vulnerabilities? And who's consuming that information? To talk a bit more about the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the cybersecurity framework, which is laid out in 5 areas, we'll identify, or we'll speak to each one of those briefly and then go into some solutions that map to these. So the first is identify. That's where your organization will develop an understanding of your environment, your systems, your assets, right? An unmanaged asset is a vulnerability. That includes not only computer systems, but your data and capabilities as well. The next area is protect. Develop and implement the appropriate safeguards to ensure delivery of critical infrastructure services. Most organizations actually focus on this piece, especially when you're looking at firewalls and antivirus, etc. But is what you have in place enough? Detect. Develop and implement the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of cybersecurity events. Right? Who's consuming that information? Who's looking at the environment? Who's taking a peek at the logs? Are you being? Do you have a group of folks who are fatigued from the number of alerts that are coming in? Respond. Develop and implement the appropriate activities to take action regarding a detected cybersecurity incident. Okay, so you have these other pieces in place. You've identified your assets. You have protections in place. However, once an attack does happen, how do you respond? Do you have a checklist? Does your team have the muscle memory to be able to respond quickly and effectively to these attacks? We'll talk about that, as well as recover. Okay. Develop and implement the appropriate activities to maintain plans for resilience and to restore any capabilities or services that were impaired due to a cybersecurity event. Okay. Now, the NetX portfolio consists of products that fit to different areas of the NIST framework. Please feel free to visit our site at netxinc.com, where you can find white papers, products and services, training schedules, even a contact form. So if there's anything that pops out at you during this particular workshop, feel free to go to the website, fill out the contact form, or contact us at sales@netxinc.com. We'd be happy to schedule a conversation with you to ensure that you have the safeguards in place to meet your organizational needs. So in the next couple of slides, I'll talk about some of the products that are in the NetX portfolio and how they can help protect your network. So as mentioned in the earlier slides, one of the most exploited attack vectors would be email, using email phishing. And with Office 365, Many organizations taking advantage of Office 365. You want to have a quick and easy way of implementing protection for your Office 365 mailboxes. That's where we have a partnership with Siren. Siren's inbox security basically protects against phishing, malicious attachments and URLs, zero-day threats, as well as integrates with your security awareness training platforms, which is very important, right? So that you can not only protect against the malicious acts, but also have a way of reporting via an integrated mechanism of the simulated phishing. The Siren product is, actually implements within minutes. And is very easy to use. I'd like to also point out that the Siren product has an incident response team. So these messages that come into the mailbox, they get classified using the AI technology. And also has a human actually looking at these messages as well to ensure that they are either blocked or if they're safe, they're marked as such. Quick case study here as it relates to Siren. In this particular customer, this particular customer is one of the supply chain customers, right? So basically, they had a significant phishing issue, which is common with most large supply chain customers. The bad actors are going to go where the money is, right? And they know that these particular customers need to get back online as quickly as possible. So they will attack those particular customers more readily. Upon deployment of 5,500 users, 300 plus phishing messages were found in just the first 2 days. In 4 months, approximately 2,000 cases were opened, multiple messages. And I'd like to also point out here the next bullet, high participation from users with the button. There's a Siren button that gets added to your MTA, your mail transport agent, whether it's Outlook or using the webmail product. There is a button there where if a user is unsure of the message that has arrived in their mailbox, they can go ahead and click the Siren button to report that message. If you're looking for deeper protection, then we turn to our partners at Fortinet for the FortiGate. Especially if you're looking for domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance. The FortiMail product is a top-rated secure email gateway that stops volume-based as well as targeted cyber threats. It allows you to disarm these messages using the FortiSandbox. There's also cousin domain protection as well. And what a cousin domain is, it basically, say for instance, we are netxinc.com. You may have a netxinc.co domain out there and get a message from A Gray at netxinc.co. You click on that message because you think it's coming from A Gray at netxinc.com, and you could potentially be phished at that point. So this product does give you that added capability as well. So not only does it act as a spam protection platform, anti-phishing allows you to detect and disarm malicious attachments and URLs, but it also can be a complete email replacement. So this can actually serve as your email server. The next product we'll look at is NextGen Firewall and network segmentation. So most firewalls developed over the past decade have actually been focused on the border, the internet-facing edge. And these have been constructed for lower speeds. And these types of devices uh, are not suitable for internal network segmentation. Well, the Fortinet, the folks over at Fortinet have actually developed a network segmentation device that can be placed in the internal network. It provides not only visibility of your users, your devices, and your applications, where from the interface you can actually click on an item and have it expand out and get IP addressing information, so an easy to use interface. But it also provides a filtering capability, antivirus capability, again, the malicious attachments and URL, SSL inspection. AI technology is built in. You can configure these automated rules to send email or you perform some action, maybe even blacklist an IP if necessary. And that single pane of glass using the FortiOS basically gives you a console that you can use to not only manage your edge firewall, but also the internal firewalls, your access points, etc. Okay. Next, we'll talk about endpoint detection and response. So we've gone from protecting the email, right, using either our Siren or Fortinet partners. Also segmenting the network to ensure that if a bad actor does infiltrate the environment, they're limited in where they can go. Remember that lateral movement, right? We want to be able to limit that, and we can do so with the network segmentation and the next-gen firewalls. But what happens at the endpoint, right? We're accustomed to the traditional signature-based antivirus products that, once there is a malicious file or malicious code has been detected, there's a signature created. It is then downloaded to the agents, either via a management server or to the agent directly. And now that particular antivirus product is aware of that particular piece of software. And that's great. That is, unless you're the first person to get that particular infection, then you're kind of hosed, but you're protecting the rest of the community. So, endpoint detection and response. With the automated EDR functions we have, the threat hunting capabilities. The FortiEDR also eliminates breach response time gaps. So as you notice here in the graphics here, we're able to, in an automated fashion, basically go through the entire security process in a lot less time than the traditional manual EDR processes, right? So also from within the FortiEDR interface, we have information as to why a particular application was flagged, those sort of things. So the interface actually displays a clear explanation as to why a suspicious or malicious file was actually stopped or blocked. Taking advantage of the MITRE attack framework, it also provides information such as the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures that were used within that particular file or detected within that particular file. It checks the boxes for discover and predict, malware protection, detect and diffuse, response and remediate, isolation, etc. Okay. Just to continue on the FortiEDR component, FortiEDR consists of pre-infection protection as well as post-infection protection. The pre-infection protection, basically in this pillar here, provides the first level of defense via custom-built kernel-level next-gen machine learning-based antivirus or NextGen AV engine. And the second area here, on the post-infection, this is where a lot of the magic actually happens, right? So once the file does get in, if somehow we've gotten past the pre-infection, now we have a lot of these capabilities available to us where we can actually roll back the infection. We can perform threat hunting, as mentioned previously, to find where that file actually exists within the rest of the network and delete it. We can go ahead and dump the memory of that particular system. And we'll see as a part of our checklist, some of the responses that we should implement once we've identified that attack has actually happened, and especially if we can identify patient zero. But back on track here, FortiEDR is the only solution that detects and stops advanced attacks in real time. And I've seen this actually work in real time, actually, as I've going through a demo of the product, and a system was infected, and it was not known. The collector was actually installed and immediately detected that particular variant. So let's talk a bit about how Fortinet's NextGen firewall actually stops an attack. This particular customer is a cloud hosting and service company. They originally deployed one of the largest firewalls available from the leading network vendor. The actual competitor was not disclosed. You'll notice here they were managing over 30,000 email boxes and supported over 50,000 websites across its infrastructure. So they had a very complex infrastructure. You'll note also that protection was not enough. They actually got hit with the CryptoLocker ransomware, and over 14,000 of their clients' users were locked out for 3 days or more. I believe the story goes up to about 5 days. So let's talk about how Fortinet actually came to the rescue. And I found this particular point to be pretty interesting. Luckily, one of the company's employees brought in a FortiGate NextGen firewall from home to see if it could assist. You'll notice at the top of the stack here, this is one of the home boxes, branch office boxes, what have you. It runs the same technology, the same interface as the enterprise. It just obviously would have less compute power than the enterprise level devices. So this speaks volumes of just the branch office and home size, the desktop size next-gen firewall from FortiGate. Okay. Then you'll see here also, while the model was designed for small businesses, the security team decided to insert the device in front of the legacy firewall. The CTO basically says it was like placing David in front of Goliath, which I get that visual, because again, this is a very tiny box, but they were able to actually stop the attack. They were able to implement the antivirus, the web content filtering capabilities, and they then were able to secure their network and regain control. The CTO states that despite having a very complex environment, they were able to switch to the FortiGate NextGen firewall in about 30 minutes. They immediately contacted their reseller and implemented the enterprise version of the firewall. I thought that was a great story, and it speaks to the power of even the lower end devices from the Fortinet folks. Our next partner would be Quest Case. As we continue to talk about how to protect our network, we want to ensure that we are collecting asset information, inventory information, patching our devices, as well as have a way of recovering using the imaging technology. So the Case product is basically an ITSM tool. It's a comprehensive ITSM tool, And it basically fulfills the important needs of delivering not only your operating system patches, but your driver updates, BIOS updates, third-party applications. It has monitoring capabilities, you name it. Or if you're unfortunate enough to get attacked with by ransomware and you have gold images of your workstations, you can redeploy those images and then restore your data as necessary, as you've laid out in your checklist or your business impact plan. To continue on protecting, as well as some remediation capabilities as well, we have our Simple Help Secure Remote Control. What this tool provides is the ability to not only connect to a system, maybe it's patient zero, or maybe it's just during the regular course of your support day, and assist end users. You can view the files. You can transfer files off that machine. You can terminate processes. You can kill services. You can run toolbox scripts. You may have maybe a decryptor actually loaded in your toolbox and run against a particular machine. You'll note also here that we have the ability to provide a VPN alternative. If you look at the CISA special publication of AA 20-073A, it talks about some of the problems with VPN. In most cases, an organization uses VPN for telework, and is more vulnerable, and that has been detected by malicious actors. Because the VPNs are online 24/7, organizations are less likely to keep them up to date. However, with a Simple Help server either hosted internally or externally, you can actually update this particular product within minutes. There's also the ability to provide multi-factor authentication. I mentioned the ability to deliver scripts, monitoring and alerting. So maybe there are specific events that you want to monitor maybe the Windows event log for, and have an email sent into your case service desk, or just simply flag that system within the console to alert your technical staff. And then session recordings as well is a capability of the tool set. Now, making your users a part of your security posture, arming your users with the knowledge and the awareness so that they can help you protect the greater organization. For that, we turn to security awareness training by our partners at KnowBe4. This product allows baseline testing to assess the phish-prone percentage of your users through free simulated phishing attacks. You also have the ability to create login pages for, let's say, LinkedIn, for instance, and see who falls for it. This also teaches your end users to hover over links before just blindly clicking on them. You can then, again, phish your users using fully automated simulated phishing attacks. Thousands of templates are available. And then you can see the results. You can report on the results and see where you're making improvements, where you need to, kind of reinforce some of the training, etc. Our partners over at KnowBe4 are experts in this area. Now, with that, we'll move into the Veritas suite of products. I'll introduce my colleague, Christian Mumma, who will discuss their last line of defense. And with your last line of defense, you want to ensure that it is solid. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Christian.
Thanks, Antwune. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Mumma. I'm the Director of Infrastructure Solutions here at NetX. A sizable amount of my career has been spent working with Veritas products, and that's mostly with NetBackup. So I'm going to spend a few minutes speaking about Veritas products and how they relate to today's ransomware discussion. I see quite a few familiar names on the call who know about NetX because we're a platinum partner with Veritas. So to our Veritas customers on the call, thanks. Thanks for joining us. And to those of you who are just learning about us, welcome. Next slide. So how can Veritas help? Throughout the presentation, Antwune's given us some great information about the NIST Framework and what that means. Of the 5 pillars of the NIST Framework, the Veritas suite fits mostly into protect, detect, and recover. So I'm sure most people on the call think of backups when they think of Veritas. That would, of course, fall under the protect and recovery categories, where most of the features I'll be talking about fall. But I think you'll be surprised of features of Veritas products that can actually help with ransomware detection as well. So data protection is a proactive approach to making sure your data is secure as it possibly can be. Proactive meaning that you're taking steps in advance to make sure that the data is protected. We use data integrity in hardening with a focus on encryption and immutable storage. Detect is reporting on data that's ingested into our system, so we can tell you what you don't know, and that could mean what hasn't been protected or what anomalous behavior may be occurring, and also unusual access to files. This is an approach where you notice something is happening that's out of the norm. And then, excuse me, recover is a reactive process. You want to make sure that you can recover quickly, then that can be automated and orchestrated, and also that you can recover at scale. So to summarize, protect is a proactive process, detect is an active process, and recover is a reactive process. Next slide, please. So we'll start speaking about the protect tier. And with that, we mostly talk about backups. Next slide. And for that, in the Veritas suite, we're speaking specifically about Veritas Net Backup. So Net Backup is a proven enterprise-grade backup and recovery software. It's an excellent solution to be included in any enterprise's cybersecurity strategy as well. Net Backup's been a market leader. They've been in the top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant for 15 years, so it has the pedigree to fit into any enterprise environment. With a very flexible deployment model, NetBackup streamlines data protection management. It also ensures business-critical resiliency and delivers customer choice with a single platform supporting any workload, any cloud, and any architecture at scale. So we're using NetBackup to protect data at the edge, be it a small or remote office, at the core data center, as well as expanding into the cloud. It's a single solution for all of those environments. And NetBackup offers the widest support with over 800 data sources, over 1,400 storage targets supported, and over 60 cloud providers are supported. So essentially that means that your environment is always protected and recoverable no matter where it resides. Next slide. So a new feature of NetBackup starting in NetBackup 9.0 is support for immutable storage. Immutable storage, whether it be on-prem with native NetBackup functionality, most notably in Veritas Flex appliances. Again, we have a small, medium, and large size of that appliance to fit whatever needs an enterprise has, at the edge or at the core. It also integrates with third-party hardware, such as Data Domain, using the OST plugins. Also, NEC HydroStore is supported. And most recently, with version 9.1, we support retention lock in AWS object storage as well. So NetBackup is aware of immutable storage and will not even try to expire data that's written to immutable storage. So that helps you avoid any errors when you're doing data expiry and cleanup. Next slide, please. Another new security feature to NetBackup is multi-factor authentication. So single sign-on as well is now supported with the web interface. We use SAML 2.0 protocol to provide that, and it's enhancing the ease of use and access to NetBackup. So the web GUI is also supported. It just makes API calls to the web interface. So what is SAML? For those that aren't quite familiar with it, stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. It's the open standard that allows identity providers to pass authentication credentials to security providers. Essentially what that means is that you can use one set of credentials to log into many different websites. So it's much simpler to manage one logon per user than it is to manage, separate logons for your email system, for something like a CRM software, and then Active Directory, and then the last thing you want is separate authentication for your backup software. So it's a single point of credential management, so that you don't need to manage things separately and create a Wild West scenario where backup admins are managing credentials for the backup software. In SAML, it uses XML, or extensible markup language, which has been around for a while, uses that as its data transfer method. You can also leverage certificates and smart cards to efficiently authenticate with NetBackup. So if you're in an environment where you have things like thin clients that use smart cards for authentication, you can integrate that with NetBackup as well. So third-party providers that have already been tested are ADFS, Shibboleth, Azure AD, Okta, and Ping Federate. I think, just from customer interactions that we have, the most asked about is Okta. So it's been fully vetted and tested. So that's a good new feature that our customers are taking advantage of. Next slide, please. All right. The NetBackup Web Interface was introduced in version 8.1.2, and since then it's been gaining more popularity as more features and functionality have been added to it. One of the best features that came with this web interface is enhanced access management and role-based access control. This allows you to identify which user is logging in and which portions of NetBackup or which features and functionality they're allowed to access, as well as which assets, backup clients, storage management, things like that, that a user has the ability to manipulate or include in a backup or recovery. So basically, this strengthens NetBackup considerably. You can configure granular access tailored to meet specific personas. So, for instance, if you want to offload some of the backup functionality to, say, a database administrator group, you can very granularly only allow them access to, SQL or Oracle backups. If your environment has multiple database groups, let's say you have DBAs for a finance section of your organization that are completely separate from the DBAs that manage, internal databases and HR databases, things of that nature. You can even segregate those two roles as well, and assign the finance assets to the finance DBA group and the internal assets and databases to the internal DBA group. So our customers have been very pleased with this as the new web interface has become more robust and more usable. We see the inclusion of other roles in other technology teams working with NetBackup. And it's accessible from any web browser, works great on an iPad. I've even brought it up on my phone in the middle of meetings to demo to customers. So it's all HTML5 and displays pretty well on most web browsers. Next slide, please. Okay, so To prevent data from being stolen, NetBackup takes advantage of data encryption. Data encryption is available at any level of the backup. So client-side data encryption is available, media server data encryption is available, and of course, storage encryption is also available. So whether it's in flight or at rest, NetBackup has the ability to encrypt the data. The more recent versions use TLS 1.3, so that provides faster and more secure methods of encrypting data. And again, it's across all backups, restores, replications, deduplication, you name it, we can encrypt the data there. Newer versions of NetBackup can integrate with third-party key management services. So far, this has been tested with Thales, Volumetric DSM, IBM SKLM, as well as Oracle Key Vault. I think IBM is one that was popular for some of our legacy customers, especially those that had IBM tape devices. They've been using IBM key management for years, so they're happy that NetBackup can integrate with that as well. Next slide, please. So now we're moving on to the detect pillar of the NIST framework. And this essentially, what we're talking about is empowering you to have a holistic view of your environment, giving you the ability to detect anomalies. So a lot of the a lot of the Veritas portfolio focuses on information and data. And essentially, we're taking advantage of some of the information we get there to look for something malicious or bad actors. Next slide. So anomaly detection, again, available at the edge, at the core, or at the cloud, is powered through 3 different products under Veritas Suite. On the right, we have Aptar, which was introduced a while ago as a backup reporting tool and grew into more of an infrastructure reporting tool. So now our customers take advantage of it to report on storage, VMware, of course, still on backups. It takes a look at the infrastructure and details about the infrastructure to look for anomalies. So that integrates fully with NetBackup and provides some really great reports where you can find things that don't seem quite right. If you have a server that executes an incremental backup and it's 10 times larger than its typical incremental backup, that can be detected in Aptar and flagged as a potential problem. It's also really good at helping find infrastructure that is not protected. So Aptar can correlate, data that it finds from your vCenter server and your VMware environment, and then see what isn't being backed up. It's really good at crossing multiple vCenters and multiple NetBackup master servers to find where you may be vulnerable. Then in the middle, we have NetBackup. We'll talk a little bit more about anomaly detection with NetBackup in some later slides. This is a new feature where NetBackup is using AI and machine learning to find things that don't quite seem right. And on the left is Data Insight, which is a file reporting tool. So basically, these 3 are file reporting, backup reporting, and then infrastructure reporting. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, AI-powered anomaly detection in NetBackup was introduced with NetBackup 9.1, so the most recent version, and it detects and alerts of suspicious behavior at the time of backups. This ensures that your data is always recoverable and enables businesses to take immediate action when ransomware strikes. To do that, it uses trend data and classification and decision trees. There's 3 new services that run now in NetBackup, starting with NetBackup 9.1. The first is a management service, and basically that gathers data from the images database as well as the jobs database. There's then a detection service, and that uses machine learning to detect the anomalies. And then the third service is an alert service which would be used to report alerts through the NetBackup Web Interface. When it looks at job data, there's several different key features or key points that it looks at. The first set are things like the client name, policy name, schedule, policy type, where the backup is being targeted, things like that it uses to create an identification group. And then it looks at other variables such as the backup image size, number of files, how long the backup took, dedupe ratio, things of that nature, to create variables for anomaly detection. So there's things that we already know, such as encrypted data does not deduplicate well. So if you see a virtual machine, for instance, that normally gets 97% deduplication, all of a sudden runs a full backup and only gets 25% deduplication, that's a pretty good indicator that the data on that virtual machine is being encrypted, and that would trigger an alert and let you know that there's an anomaly there. Next slide, please. So data insight, as I mentioned earlier, looks at the file level. So this goes out and takes a look at files that are on things like NAS devices or maybe a Windows file server, things of that nature. It also integrates with NetBackup, so it gets metadata about files from what NetBackup discovers, as it's backing things up. So individual file names and directory trees. Things like the last modified time, different things like that. So it can take a look and see if you have, a server where 75% of the data, the modified date changed overnight, and that's atypical behavior for that server. Data Insight is a great place to detect things like that. It also can run scans on file servers or NAS devices, review things, and then report back. Data Insight has a lot more functionality than that, but that's how it's relevant to today's discussion about ransomware. So please, by all means, if you'd like to learn more about Data Insight, let us know. Our contact information is in the meeting chat. Next slide, please. So risk mitigation, again, with AppTar, takes a look at things from the entire infrastructure. So AppTar is really good about doing things like taking, a baseline level of backup information, looking at the entire backup history and searching for anomalies, similar to the way that NetBackup does it as well. And then the analytics software can help spot false positives like job duration times or image sizes, things of that nature. Another thing AppTar is really good at is collating all the information and then displaying them in a high-level summary. So providing a dashboard of your entire environment. And this can cross multiple data centers. We have some users, some customers that have it implemented on several different continents. And they take advantage of AppTar so that it can be a single pane of glass to view their infrastructure on-prem, again, at remote sites, small offices, or even in the cloud. And it's fairly simple to install and has a huge community where folks will create custom reports or things that they find useful, and then upload them to the community report library. And then any other customer is open to go and then download those reports, see if they're just as useful, maybe even modify them and then upload a different version of it. So AppTar is really good for taking a look at your infrastructure as a whole. Next slide, please. So lastly, and possibly the most importantly, we'll talk about the recovery pillar of the NIST framework. And this is, as Antwune mentioned, your last line of defense, right? So something bad happens, This is where you go to make all of that right. This again will be heavily focused on Veritas Net Backup, and we'll talk about some of the newer features of Net Backup to help with recovery. So there may be some things in here that even our current Veritas customers aren't aware of. Next slide, please. So starting with NetBackup 8.3, the Veritas resiliency platform is included with NetBackup capacity-based licensing. I have a slide on that upcoming. There's also a new feature, instant rollback for VMware, which is a really fast way to restore a VM in place. So that's great if that VM does become infected with ransomware. It's a really fast way to recover it to before the point where it's getting encrypted. I have a slide about that, as well as another slide about continuous data protection, or CDP, which is a new feature in NetBackup 9.1. Some other things that have been around for a little bit that folks might not be aware of are instant access for virtual machines, VMware, and for SQL databases. Instant access essentially allows you to present a volume or a disk to either VMware, an ESXi host, or a Microsoft SQL server, and that what it prevents that file share is from a backup image. So for VMware, for instance, it would present a temporary NFS data store to ESX that will allow you to power on a virtual machine from a backup image. And that happens in, say 30 seconds, less than a minute. This is really good for recovery because you can power on something like an Active Directory server or your tier 0 recovery. And while it's up and running and being used in the background, you can use vMotion to move it over to your production data store. So that's very low recovery time. And the recovery point would be based on your last backup. Also, cloud and on-prem snapshots have been enhanced a great deal in the more recent versions of NetBackup. Another product that at one point was a standalone product called CloudPoint has now been integrated completely with NetBackup. As of NetBackup 8.3, CloudPoint functionality is part of NetBackup licensing, as well as part of the NetBackup Web Interface. Bare metal recovery has been around for a while. We've been using that for decades, actually. And that allows you to recover a physical server to dissimilar hardware. So let's say, you have a server that was being backed up, a Windows server running on an HP DL380, for instance, and you have another DL380 to recover to, but it's a Gen 9 instead of a Gen 8, and it has different array controllers, things of that nature. BMR will allow you to insert the updated device drivers so that you can ensure that once you do complete the restore, the machine will be able to boot. More importantly, I think most folks now take advantage of BMR to do physical to virtual conversions. So because we know the drivers for VMware are all pretty consistent because they all run, on VMware's hypervisor, it's very easy now to take the backup of a physical server and restore it as a virtual machine directly into VMware. And then there's always traditional recovery, which is restoring the files and folders or even system state to a NetBackup client running on a physical or virtual machine. Next slide. Okay, so NetBackup resiliency, as mentioned earlier, Veritas Resiliency Platform is a standalone product, but is also now included with NetBackup licensing, and there's also integration between the two web interfaces. The resiliency platform basically allows or provides orchestration of recovering assets. So it can automate recovery at scale to make sure that you meet your RTOs. This means it can recover virtual machines. Individual assets can be grouped together and then linked together to create virtual business services. So if you have something like a 3-tiered application that has, say, Oracle databases running on Red Hat VMs on the back end, and then a Java middleware, and then maybe Microsoft IIS servers running for your presentation layer. All three of those may have different recovery point objectives. So, for instance, your database backend, you want to be able to recover to the smallest recovery point possible. So you may use something like VMware replication that the resiliency platform can provide, so that you can recover your VM, and only lose a minute of data or something to that effect. We call it near-time recovery. But your middleware and IIS servers might not change that much, so it's okay to recover those from a backup image. VRP recognizes that and allows you to link the three of those together and bring up an application at your recovery site in an orchestrated process. It will also re-IP everything for the network at your recovery site, as well as make DNS changes, different things like that to provide a seamless transition from production to recovery. And like I was saying before, you can configure everything into virtual business services so that you can move entire applications with a click of one button. Next slide, please. So a newer feature for NetBackup that I spoke about before is instant rollback for VMware. So for years, we've been doing block-based backups of virtual machines. And this allows us to back up, what before might have taken hours in minutes or even seconds. It utilizes VMware's change block tracking. So the native CVT that's provided by VMware to just take block level incremental backups, and then in the back end we synthesize a full backup image from that. So instant rollback does sort of the same thing but in reverse. Since we know what the changed blocks are since the last backup, we can simply apply the blocks from the backup to a VM that's running in production. This allows you to do an entire virtual machine restore in a relatively small amount of time. It's something that would overwrite an in-place VM. So as I mentioned, it's a little bit different than instant access, where you boot a VM from a backup image. That's fast, but then you need to move the entire virtual machine in the background. Instant rollback writes over a currently running virtual machine or an in-place virtual machine with a previous backup image very quickly. Next slide, please. So another new and exciting feature of NetBackup is continuous data protection, or CDP, for VMware. This also allows a very low recovery point for VMware backups. And CDP is a departure from your traditional snapshot-based backups. So today, or previously, with NetBackup and most backup softwares, the backup software makes an API call to vCenter, which requests the snapshot of the target virtual machine. That snapshot is then mounted on the backup infrastructure, and just the change blocks are transferred back, which is really fast for a backup. But every time you take a backup, you're creating a snapshot, mounting the snapshot, then dismounting the snapshot and deleting the snapshot. So it's slightly cumbersome, and we run into problems, for instance, for file systems that can't be quiesced efficiently. All of that snapshot creation and removal can actually affect production. We refer to that as backup stun or snapshot stun. We saw that used to be very frequent for things like BlackBerry servers, which had highly transactional data. It's hard to quiesce that file system and get it to a stable point to take the snapshot. What Continuous data protection for VMware does is use VMware's native I/O filtering to split off IOs that are going to the data store. So as a write comes in, for instance, it's still written to the data store, but on its way it gets duplicated and sent to NetBackup. NetBackup then takes checkpoints or protection points at a user-defined increment. So, for instance, you could say, for this VM, I want to create a recovery point every 15 minutes. So NetBackup will take those IOs and create that recovery point on the NetBackup servers rather than on your ESX infrastructure. And essentially what that comes down to is an easy way to take multiple backups throughout the day. You know, you can get, some folks are getting as granular as every 5 minutes, which will give you more recovery points for critical systems. So, for instance, if you VM started getting encrypted by ransomware at 2:45 a.m. And then it wasn't detected until the next morning, you could use NetBackup to recover the VM to 2:40 or 2:35. Run that restore, remove the malware, and then continue with business as usual. So that about wraps it up for the Veritas portion of the presentation. Antwune, if you want to go ahead and advance the slide, you can start talking about what happens when you are attacked.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Christian. So now that we've discussed many of the solutions that you can use to protect and recover your environment, what do we do once you're actually attacked? So before we get started, I'd like to ask the question, and I'll leave it out there for you to ponder. Do you have a method to tabletop or take your team to the range for incident response? How are you building that muscle memory? During attack is probably the worst time to try and figure it out, or even to go through a checklist. If you'd like to have a conversation about tabletop exercises and how you can ensure that your team is ready to respond, please contact us and we will be happy to have that conversation. So, attacked, now what? Let's start with the detection and analysis. Okay, so these next three steps are CISA actually recommends that we follow these in sequence. I've also added down below here the reference for this response checklist. We want to ensure that you have all the information available to you to make the appropriate decisions and make the appropriate next steps, or take the appropriate next steps. So step one is you want to determine which systems were impacted and immediately isolate them. If several systems on the subnet appear to be impacted, you can then take that network offline at the switch level. And we talked about, as a part of the FortiEDR product, the ability to isolate systems. And you can have these systems isolated automatically. If a infection is detected or suspicious activity is detected, it can go ahead and move that system to a group within FortiEDR that allows only limited connection, maybe the connectivity to just the Simple Help software. The reason why you want to isolate those machines is obviously you want to avoid the lateral movement of the malicious software or the infection. Only in the event that you are unable to disconnect the devices from the network should you power them down to avoid that additional spread. This particular point is emphasized simply because we want to make sure that we can capture that memory footprint. If you take advantage of the FortiEDR product that we mentioned earlier, you can actually grab that memory footprint. Okay, and that would then allow you the information to perform some additional analysis to determine, what type of variant, for instance, you may have been attacked with. And then you want to triage the impacted system for restoration and recovery, right? So you want to ensure that you are restoring or recovering the critical systems first, based on your business impact analysis. Next, you want to go ahead, as a part of the detection and analysis, you want to confer with your team to develop and document an initial understanding of what has occurred based on the initial analysis. So although we may have gone through a tabletop exercise and understand what steps you need to take, these steps may be different based on the particular variant or the systems that have been actually impacted, or the level of infiltration that has happened. So you want to make sure that you are engage your internal and external teams and stakeholders with an understanding of what they can provide to help you mitigate, respond to, and recover from the incident. And when we talk about recovery, Christian just went through a great presentation of the capabilities for recovery. Not only from a data aspect, but also from a full system recovery using the BMR component of the Veritas solutions. Re-imaging workstations using the case product, things of that nature. If you've implemented these types of solutions. Consider requesting assistance from CISA, MS, ISAC, and your local or federal law enforcement. Basically look at contacting some of these logos down below based on your industry. Share that information with them so that they can assist you with not only recovery, but what your next steps should be. I also want to emphasize again, ensure that you've contacted your cybersecurity insurance company, so that you can understand what the appropriate next steps should be. Okay. Now, containment and eradication. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a system image and memory capture of a sample of the affected devices, workstations, servers, etc. Again, we can capture memory footprint using the FortiEDR component. We can capture images using the Veritas product, as well as the case product for if we're looking at capturing a bunch of workstations that may have been infected. Okay. What this is going to do is going to help you to collect any relevant logs, right, by keeping those in place, as well as samples of any precursor malware binaries and associated observables or indicators of compromise. We want to make sure that we can collect as much information as possible. We're going to become detectives, so that we can figure out exactly what happened and why. Again, consult the federal law enforcement regarding possible decryptors that are available, and security researchers may have already broken some of the encryption algorithms. Another great source out there is Bleeping Computers. I mentioned that one specifically because I was talking with a customer not too long ago who was impacted by ransomware, and I pointed them out to Bleeping Computers to look for information based on that particular variant. However, they had not yet discovered the type of variant that they've been attacked with. You're going to want to identify the systems and accounts involved in the initial breach. These can be email accounts. So you want to go ahead and disable those. You want to there's a item in a checklist in the future where you're going to actually, change passwords and things of that nature as well. But we want to figure out, exactly what account was being used to infiltrate or, perform that lateral movement, as in that success story for the MSP. The CTO's credentials were actually collected and were used to actually navigate through the environment, which basically gave them access to absolutely everything. You want to, based on the breach or compromise details determined, You want to contain any associated systems that may be used for further or continued unauthorized access, right? So again, disabling those systems. Once we, for instance, if we look at the Windows Server log, or we look at any other logs, and we see that communication is coming from server ABC to all of these other servers, and generally there's that's not normal, the communication pattern. Then you want to go ahead and isolate that particular server. You can disable virtual private networks, remote access services, and things of that nature, so that you can kill that access. Additional suggested actions would include server-side data encryption, quick identification processes. I mentioned reviewing those open sessions. You want to take a look at the logs. You want to take a look at of encrypted file and see who it was actually modified by. That could help you actually track down the credentials that are being used, and then from there you can quickly disable that particular account as a tactic to stop the spread, so to speak. You want to review the terminal services, remote connection manager, event log, to look for RDP network connections. You may have disabled RDP in your environment, and you notice that RDP has connections are being made to systems. That is a clear indication that, hey, I have credentials out there that are being used to re-enable the RDP component and are making live connections. Those are unauthorized, so you can go ahead and kill those. You want to also review your Windows security logs. I mentioned taking advantage of the Simple Help tool. You could look for or be alerted for specific events in the Windows log. So maybe there's a particular event ID or the body of a message that has, based on research, has been written to the security logs. You can go ahead and set up an alert so that you're notified. Should that particular item hit your security logs. You do things such as run Wireshark on the impacted server. Again, you can filter on IP addresses to see who's actively writing or renaming files. It kind of ties into some of the previous points that I've made. Also, understanding or viewing the file extension of the encrypted files could also help you to understand what you've been attacked with. As we continue down to containment and eradication, we want to conduct an examination of existing organizational detection and prevention systems. We'll look at your antivirus logs, your IDS logs, your IPS logs. Contact your SOC team, see what they have detected. What information they've been collecting. You want to conduct an extended analysis to identify any outside in or inside out persistent mechanisms. So an outside in persistence may indicate authenticated access to an external system via rogue account. So you have A Gray 123 actually making a live connection out to a server that has a internet IP address over the internet. That could be an indication that I have a outside in persistence connection. Or inside out, you want to make sure that there are no accounts connected via backdoors, right? Connected to your firewalls and things of that nature. You want to rebuild systems based on a prioritization of critical services, health and safety or revenue generating services. Use pre-configured standard images if possible. Again, taking advantage of BMR, taking advantage of your gold images, things of that nature. And then once the environment has been fully cleaned and rebuilt, you want to ensure that you reset those passwords, right? Force a password change. I don't care how much complaining you get from the user environment. You want to go ahead and have a blanket reset all the passwords. You want to address any vulnerabilities and gaps in your security. You want to make sure that your systems are up to date, patched. Your software is patched and up to date. even at the driver levels, right? Want to make sure that those systems are all up to date, and then use a vulnerability scanner. Either have a partner such as NetX come in and review the environment to ensure that there are no additional vulnerabilities. We can go ahead and get a baseline out there. Things of that nature, so that you can ensure that you are protected and that there's no remnants left behind that could actually cause a reinfection. So, recovery and post-incident activities, we want to reconnect and restore the data from backups. These, again, should be stored encrypted and offline. We're going to restore based on priority. We want to document lessons learned. Unfortunately, you're not going to know everything going in, even with having these desktop war games, we'll call them. Unfortunately, but you want to ensure that every lesson that you've learned from this particular incident has been documented to basically fuel your knowledge base and make you even more prepared for this type of incident in the future. You want to consider sharing lessons learned and relevant indicators of compromise with CISA or your sector's ISEC or ISO. Basically, what this does is it allows others in your community, your verticals, to understand, the different attack vectors, what has been done to actually recover. The bad guys share information, right? That's why there's CSVs out there. So the good guys should also share information to help protect the community as a whole. I'd like to also share, and I mentioned a number of times during the presentation, sales@netxinc.com. Feel free to reach out to us at any of at the email address or our contact numbers. Also, reach out to us or follow us on our social media platforms to ensure that you are staying up to date with the latest webinars and content that NetX puts out to ensure that you are very well prepared for any of these types of incidents that we've mentioned today. And with that, I thank you.
Great job, Antwune and Christian. Thanks for sharing the variety of knowledge that we hopefully everybody on this workshop found both informative and educational. There's a lot of information we just conveyed to you, and as Antwune said, we've got obviously a lot of reach out points through social media and our HTML links. If you visit our website, we have on the security tab, we'll have a ransomware ebook that you can actually click and download for further information. And one of the other things I'll just accentuate that Antwune mentioned, we have a cyber threat assessment program, which is actually a very comprehensive program where we can put a device in your network, do a discovery, and provide you with a very detailed report of all of the threat assessments that are inside of your organization. And we'd love to do that. We can do that at no charge for you. We'd love for you to take advantage of that. And we're available to you by either reaching out to us by a call or email or the link. Thank you again for your time. Hopefully you found this informative, and we'll be having follow-on workshops/webinars in the future. Look for that in a email invite in the near future. Thank you again.